So there was some good news on the border, and I am going to let the man who actually led the way on this tell you about what it all means. Eric Schmitt, he is the Missouri Attorney General. I spent some time with him yesterday at a meeting of Attorney Generals and invited him on the program today to meet you again. We've had him on before. Eric, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you, Glenn.
So, first of all, congratulations. Tell the American people what happened on Friday.
It's a big win, Glenn, for border security, for national security, to stop the flow of illegal immigration, drug trafficking, human trafficking, with the judge's order that he issued a little after 5 o'clock. The federal judge issued a little after 5 o'clock on Friday. So to give it some context, on day one, Joe Biden reversed President Trump's very successful Remain in Mexico policy, or otherwise known as the Migrant Protection Protocols, which is to say that as people were coming here, if you're seeking asylum, which, by the way, it was found that 9 out of 10 asylum claims were bogus. The Biden folks didn't even acknowledge that or even reference that. And the judge points that out. They didn't even do their due diligence. But as you were coming here seeking asylum, that Mexico was the waiting room, because what we know is that if you let those folks into the United States, give them a court date on the honor system, and they're released into the interior of the United States, you don't ever see them again. And that's exactly what has been happening. The 1.1 million people since January have come here illegally. And but it has created a perverse incentive. And the judge cited this, that if you have people who get paid to get people here illegally, if they know all they have to do is say, we're seeking asylum, and they are in the United States, it's very lucrative for these really bad guys to take advantage, by the way, of people along the way, too. It's big business. And so the Trump policy that said Mexico's the waiting room significantly cut down on this illegal activity. We said the Biden administration can't do what they did, which is to reverse that policy, and a judge agreed with us. So the good news here is that we're going to get back to President Trump's Remain in Mexico policy, and it's a great example of federalism at work.
Okay,
thankfully.
So hang on. Before we get into this, I want to know a couple of things. The judge said that they had to reverse it. Why? What was in your case that showed that they didn't have the right to drop this particular thing that Trump had in place?
Great question. So on day one, and we can talk about some other executive actions that President Biden took that were illegal. On day one, in basically 2 sentences, just says we're reversing it and opens up the borders. Okay. The reality is, under a very technical scheme, the Administrative Procedure Act, you have to go through a process of taking in notice and comment, hearing from people who want to weigh in, and balancing all of those things before you make an administrative change. Now, I would argue that we've allowed way too many administrative departments and department heads to make law, and we ought to allow that, got to get back to Article 1 branch. But be that as it may, they didn't even do that. Then we filed the lawsuit. Then they came back in a haphazard way to try to cover their tracks and say, oh, no, we did consider this. And the judge said, no, you didn't. You didn't in the first place. You didn't later. You've been caught red-handed. This is an illegal act. This is an illegal executive action. Therefore, we are back now to the policy that was lawfully enacted by the Trump administration, the Remain in Mexico policy. So this is, again, an example of you have to push back. We're not going to accept this sort of lawlessness of the Biden administration. And they've done this on social cost of greenhouse gases. They've done this on the Keystone XL pipeline, and there's a number of lawsuits in the pipeline there to challenge this. But this is by far and away, I think, the most significant victory against the Biden administration for these kind of actions.
I'm speaking to the Attorney General of Missouri, Eric Schmitt, who led the way on this. Now, Eric, you say this is a very good thing because they've been ordered to do it. Well, they've been ordered to do other things, and they're not obeying the courts. They're dismissing the courts. Also, this was happening in a district court, if I'm not mistaken, here in Texas. What makes you think that this will be supported? Because the government is going to appeal. What makes you believe this will actually win at the highest level?
Well, this was a very well-reasoned opinion, and I think the judge, who was in Amarillo, and by the way, the Department of Justice tried very hard to move it out of that because this particular DOJ was trying to get it to an Obama-appointed judge. But the reality is the rule of law prevailed here, and that's all you really want from the judiciary as far as I'm concerned, to interpret the law as it's written, not how they want it to be. That's not the left's view of what they want judges to do. They're much more, in favor of judicial activism. But the judge gave them 7 days to appeal. So they would appeal to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a strong conservative, and I mean that in the sense of, they rule based on the law. So we're confident that the Court of Appeals will reject the appeal. But this is a big deal because if you think of what's happening at the border, it's a total disaster. There's a 21-year high in illegal crossings. You have, and Missouri's interest in this, by the way, not being a border state, is we've taken on human trafficking. We've spent a lot of resources. Our state has made it a priority to take on the dark underworld of human trafficking. And these cartels are very, very engaged in human trafficking, including trafficking drugs across the border. And it's very profitable for them right now because people are, being released into the interior of the United States.
Eric, we spent time together yesterday. I was lucky enough to be invited up to the Republican Attorney General's meeting, which I think you have, once a year? And and I was impressed with how many of you guys know exactly what you are up against, and that you are the last line of defense. I mean, after you guys, we're down to our local sheriff. You are the last line of defense to be able to stand for the Bill of Rights. What was the...
Yeah, look...
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and on our discussion, I think that this really is a fight to save America. And I don't mean that rhetorically in some grandiose speech. I mean it very practically. I think the Republic is truly on the line. And I think that for us, and this is what I believe, and I think a lot of Americans, certainly your listeners do, I know you do, that America is the most noble, important experiment in the history of the world. What the founders said was, everybody before us in 1776 had it exactly backwards. We don't need to ask. Our rights don't come from a king or a queen or some despot. Our rights come from God. And what government is a project to protect those rights, to protect those individual rights that were given by God. So your ability to speak your mind, your ability to defend yourself, we're born with those things. And America is very unique in the history of the world. It's an exception. That's what American exceptionalism means. We are exceptional in the sense that most places around the world still to this day don't believe that. And if we lose this fight to save America, there's no going back. We are the last best hope for mankind. We got to get it right. So when you talk about these things that are happening in Washington, D.C., federalizing elections and undermining election security just to obtain power by using what they were doing during the pandemic to loosen those integrity measures just to gain power, to teach our kids to despise America, as opposed to teaching them what America really is about. The Bill of Rights, which is very important. But most, I think it starts with the Declaration of Independence, which is our mission statement. It says who we are, what we believe, what we stand for. And the Constitution then sets forth that framework to protect those rights. The states came together to create a federal government of limited powers. And the people reign supreme, not some sovereign authority who claims that they got their power from God and we have to ask permission. That's very unique. We don't talk about that as much anymore, but I certainly view my mission as an attorney general and now running for the United States Senate as protecting that, protecting individual rights. Somebody asked me, and we announced a cold case arrest last week in St. Louis, and as part of my job as Attorney General of the state's chief law enforcement officer and legal officer, and I was asked the question, how do you feel about fear being used right now to get people to wear masks? And I said, there's nothing new under the sun. That's what every dictator, And every tyrant has said since the beginning of the world, they've used fear to aggregate and accumulate power. I do not want to live in some futuristic dystopian biomedical security state. And I'm going to do everything I can with the powers that I swore to protect the Constitution, to protect individual rights. And I think we have to be absolutely committed to that. And if we band together on that, we're going to win this thing. And our kids will look back, our grandkids will look back and be very, very proud of each. And you don't have to be the Attorney General to stand up for that. I see people going to school board meetings. I see people going to city council meetings for standing up who don't want to take this anymore. They believe in America, what we are, and who we are, and what we can be. So that's a very important role for me as AG.
We're talking to Eric Schmitt, the Missouri Attorney General, and he is going to be running for Senate in the state. I had to leave right after I spoke to all of you last night, and I'm wondering how many of the people, because I didn't get a chance to ask the whole room, out of the 22 that were there, how many of them are on the same page with you now, that you're saying what you're saying this morning?
I think it's a very committed group. It is a very committed group to these principles. We have a unique role in our system in that, as we talked about, government's our project to protect those rights. That's our job. That's our job, to protect the rights. My job isn't to give cover to some authoritarian regime because it's the government. That's not my job. My job is to make sure that people can say their piece under the First Amendment, that under the Second Amendment, people can protect themselves. And so you see a lot of the work that we do. We're leading the brief on making sure that this restrictive regime in New York, where you have to tell the government or some bureaucrat that you're really in danger to be able to conceal carry. That's not what the founders ever intended. We're fighting that fight. Whether it's, the abortion issue going to the United States Supreme Court, we're fighting that fight. Whether it's protecting First Amendment rights, or, you could go down pick the issue. Yeah. I think right now pushing back against the federal government, and by the way, also pushing back against local governments that want to treat people as subjects and not citizens. We're committed to that fight. I believe it in my core, and I'm telling you, Glenn, you know it from your listeners. There is something happening right now in the city council rooms, in the school board rooms, in these hearing rooms. People don't want to lose America. They don't, because it is this shining city on a hill. And we've always been a people that wanted to know what's on the other side of that mountain. And what people see right now is a cliff. And we have a choice. What is our role going to be in the future of this republic? Because as Ben Franklin said, when he walked out of the convention, you've got a republic, man, if you can keep it. It's hard work, because human nature, and the founders knew this, human nature is, you see it across the world, it's happened before, is to accumulate power, dole out favors to your cronies. So the founders knew that spreading out power among the branches, with federalism, making sure that no one person or branch was too powerful, all of that, as federalism works horizontally and vertically, was meant to do one thing: protect individual liberty.
Eric,
and that's our path forward.
I can't thank you enough for everything you're doing. We're watching you guys carefully. Yesterday I offered support on anything that we can do to help you guys out, because I do believe you are the fire line. Thank you so much, and my best to everybody else that are having meetings this week with you, all the attorney generals. Thank you so much.
By the way, I want to thank you for all you're doing to talk about these issues too, and your listeners. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Thank you.